So we have eminent panelist right here who's going to take the stage and discuss the topic of decarbonization. But before we do that, I think it's important that we've been hearing this word decarbonization now for especially 1 year plus since the time Mr. Modi went and committed that India will decarbonize by 2070. That was fine. But the point is, what does decarbonization means? There have been a lot of panel discussions, there have been a lot of presentations where people have been debating on the subject. But I still find that the topic is misunderstood. Last I was discussing with Yash also here. I said several discussions that we did, the audience especially struggled to connect with the topic itself. So before we get into that, so I'll just make a small presentation on understanding the fundamental. Now you may find that so easy. Some of you are like gurus in that area, but I'm sure it'll give a little warmer start to the panel discussion. So what does decarbonization, net zero that we are talking about, what does it mean? Now if you look at it, our Honorable Prime Minister also spoke about something called Amrit Kal. Now Amrit Kal is the golden period. And if you look at the Vedic astrology, that's where this term comes in. And it talks about the golden period for India. And then I was reading somewhere, and at one of the conferences, they said that by 2050, India is going to be a developed country. Now that hit me. Because if by 2050, we're going to be a developed country, and globally they are talking about, India has given a commitment that 2070 will be decarbonized. And whereas the entire world is talking about decarbonization by 2040, then as a world leader, would our target be 2070 or would it be earlier? I think it's something that we need to ponder upon. We need to think. But the important part is this period has begun. And the next 30 years, 2050, if you have to reach there, that's what it's going to be. We're already number one in population, correct? So we may not be economy-wise number one, but population is number one. And this population is right now an asset. Nobody's talking, surprisingly, nobody's talking about it negatively. We are saying with 28 years of average age of India, we are set for our 2050 target to be the developed country by that time. Lots of urbanization, that is what is driving the economy here in India, which is very good. Lots of us have construction sector, hospitality sector, and we are going to be happy because as more and more urbanization takes place, so would the hospitality also. Another statistics that caught my eye was, this just came about a week, 10 days back, which said that we are going to be a $7 trillion economy by 2030. Today we are about $3.5 trillion and we're going to double. You remember earlier we used to speak about 5 trillion? 5 trillion chota rahega. Now we talk about 7 trillion. And 7 trillion is 2030 is the target. And today where our economy stands is where China was in 2006-07. That's exactly the level where China is. They took about 17 years to reach where they are today. And if we get our act together, that's the economic size which is going to be in the next 17 years. So another indicator why the 2050 could be a realistic target for us. Lots of ecosystem which is created in terms of the demographic advantage that I spoke about, in terms of population, in terms of the infrastructure that is being built, and that can also be seen in the rise which the hospitality sector is seeing at this point of time. If you look at another indicator, which is the electrical requirement, by 2030, our 70% electricity is going to go for domestic, industrial, and commercial applications. Agriculture is going to be left behind in a big way. That shows again the trend of urbanization and where it is going to go. In terms of the floor space, rise in the residential and the commercial segment, which includes hospitality. There are talks about which we keep hearing that we are developing at the rate of nearly 1 Chicago a year. So be it, we are making that. And lots of construction that we are doing on the infrastructure. I come from HVAC background, the air conditioning background, and what struck me a lot in that study which I was seeing, that if we continue the way we are continuing, the large orange patch that you see here refers to the room air conditioners, which would be split ACs in the window ACs. That, from a share what it has today, in another 15 years from now, look at the share that is going to have tomorrow. That means a lot of air conditioners and window air conditioners being added, which doesn't go well for our environment when we talk about decarbonization. And that trend also comes down to the industry that we all represent. Another thing, statistic that caught my eye was every 15 seconds we are going to buy an air conditioner by 2037. In India, every 15 seconds we are going to buy an air conditioner. That's a lot of ACs that we have. We've had a great green building movement so far, which should have ideally been good because we are today one of the largest green footprint on earth. We speak about it. 12 billion plus square feet of between the various rating systems that we have is registered. Lots of equipment efficiencies, and there's a very famous ad that we keep looking at कि जब कार को देखता है कोई पूछता है कितना माइलेज देती है, right? So similarly, whenever we buy an equipment today, the first thing we ask is कितनी electricity लेता है, कितना efficient है. So same thing has moved into our industry at this point of time, which is good. But all that statistics that we talk about on green has not taken us anywhere. At this point of time, the climate change is real. Yesterday, when I started from Delhi in the morning, in the month of May, which is the peak summer in May, we had fog in the morning. I have never seen it in my 50 years of life, a fog in the month of May in Delhi, and we could not drive the car. I had to catch an early morning flight and I couldn't see the road in front. Unheard of. It's been 17 degrees temperature in Delhi. We have not switched on the. आप वहीं से आ रहे लग रहा है because yes, 14.2 था कल. Month of May when we are supposed to get 45 degrees, कुछ गलत नहीं हो रहा है कहीं पे. So something is happening out there which is unheard of in our lifetime that we have been around. So this green building movement has really done a very little to what we do. Looking at that and now connecting to what our Honorable Prime Minister said in terms of 2070 decarbonization. 2070 net zero carbon, how do you reach there with an exponentially rising construction activity? The current practices that we have are not leading us to where we should be going. As we talk, a new building comes up in India. By the time we finish if this is the rate at which construct, what will come? I think that's what we need. Getting down to the fundamentals, what does the global warming is all about? Why are we talking about decarbonization? The most important is, let's understand the fact of greenhouse gases. I know going back to class 8, 9, 10, but being an engineer, I like my thought process to be clear. You know, we hear about the CO2 which comes out, carbon dioxide which comes out. What happens with the CO2 is, it goes and lingers in the atmosphere. When it lingers there, the moment you release, it just lingers there. So what happens is, when you have this sun rays which are coming, the heat which is coming from the sun, it gets reflected from the earth, tries to go back into the sky, which it cannot because it has been trapped by the CO2 layer which exists there. And that is what causes global warming. And that is why the carbon dioxide is being talked about as a GHG emitter or a greenhouse gas that we talk about. There are other gases also which we don't talk about, like something like methane. Who's the largest producer of methane in the world? America. It's India. Because the number of cattle population that we have here. We have the highest world's cattle population here with us. And methane is many more times potent in terms of global warming potential that it has than what we talk of the CO2. So, abhi to wahan gaye nahi hai. We'll talk about it some other day. Embodied carbon is the linked CO2 emissions with a product right from the day that you extract the ground till the point you put it back into the earth, into the waste that we generate when the building gets demolished. So that entire life cycle of the product is about the embodied CO2 emissions. if you are able to put that end of the life product back into the system from where it started, that means you reuse it. That is what we call about the circular economy. That is what is called circularity, and that's what we'll be talking about with our panelists today, about the materials that you use in your hospitality industry, what is the circularity aspect of it, and do they talk about it. So I think I'm just giving you the questions that are going to come in the direction that we like you to talk about. So that's why it's important for you to understand, if I ask that circularity concept, what am I talking? And that's the reason why we are doing this exercise. And the carbon neutrality is the one where whatever the CO2 emissions take place, we are able to fix them in terms of jitna produce kiya, utna neutralize bhi kiya, and that is what is carbon neutral is all about. There is no such thing as zero carbon, because there are a lot of times we hear words, and especially in the hospitality industry, when I talk to our friends, they say zero carbon. There's zero carbon koi cheez nahi hai, because carbon emissions to hoga hi hoga. It's about achieving a neutrality. 40% of the carbon emissions in the world comes from construction sector, which is where you and I belong. And 40% may say, so out of that, 23% that we talk about of the global carbon emission come from just the metals and the cement itself, the concrete cement that we use. So as we build hotels the way we are building, that is one of the challenging area which is being talked about in this meeting. Somebody told me that carbon emission ke baare mein kyun baat kar rahe ho, it just sounds like a fad. At India, our carbon emission per person, the GDP, if you look at it, per person emission which are there, is minuscule if you compare with other countries. That's fine when we sit on a global forum. That's fine to talk about it. But incidentally, we are the third largest carbon emitter in the world. Let's talk about that fact, at least in this room amongst us. Har jaake, yes, we can divide it by 1.25 billion people and say, aapko itna se produce karna hai. लेकिन करते तो इतना है कि हम थर्ड लार्जेस्ट हैं. यही नहीं, ये तो अभी करंट कंस्ट्रक्शन एंड करंट ऑपरेशन लेवल्स पे. इफ दिस गोज द वे वी आर गोइंग, in terms of the construction area that I showed you, in terms of the Amrit Kal that I showed you, in terms of the GDP growth that I showed you, imagine where India would drive the world. And that's why we are here in this room talking on this subject. Our demand for bricks, steel, cement is going to go manifold. And one of the most important things that we keep talking about in this subject is two aspects of the decarbonization, and this is again where my questions will go. One part is what we call embodied carbon. Embodied carbon is what I spoke about right from the point of view of extraction till the point of demolition. What is the carbon CO2 emissions which are linked to that product? That's called the embodied carbon, which generally is an area of topic for architects. We're going to have, that's why we have architects on our panel. Sandeep Shikre is going to be there. Millie is there, coming from the GBCI, from the US Green Building Council. So they are the ones who are going to focus more in terms of the embodied carbon we look at. There is another aspect that you see, which is the operation stage, which is the life cycle of the building. And the life cycle, the operation stage is where we come down to operational carbon. Operational carbon is where the engineers come into the picture, and that's why we have two more panelists. One is our Rohit right there, and of course, grand old man, which I'll introduce a bit later, Bhumi Engineer Sahab, who is, again, these two are the gurus in the area of operational. So we'll have the questions coming to them. And finally, on the policy front, we have Yash from KPMG, who's going to be joining us. So you can now see how the panelists were selected and the basis that they were selected. So we're going to discuss everything from a embodied carbon, which is the construction stage, to an operational carbon, which is the operation stage of the building. And obviously, there is a lot of impact which embodied carbon has whenever we are constructing the building, and the operational carbon, which is during the life cycle of the building, which could be 40, 50 years, whatever you design life is. Why are we talking about it? Just because Modi ji ने बोल दिया? यही reason है आज हम लोग यहाँ बैठ के point discuss कर रहे हैं? Not really. If you see our customers, हमारे customers कौन हैं? Of course, आप हैं as a hotelier. Some of us are designers. For us, you are the customers. There are developers who make the hotels, and you as hoteliers are the operators out there. You do take the operation. Currently, India is the first country in the world where the CSR got compulsory. So our Company Act 2013 talked about the CSR, where we are the first country in the world. Of course, a lot has been said in terms of the BRSR, which is the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report, which has been made mandatory by SEBI for the top 1,000 companies on the stock exchange. If you look at the investors which come and invest in the project, they are talking about, again, the terms like we keep hearing about is ESG investing, and that's an area where Yash would be able to throw a lot of light on what is happening in ESG. There is also talked about a lot of corporates today, including some of the global ones who are sitting there. We talk about SBTi, Science-Based Target, where we give a commitment that we will, as a company, we will limit our CO2 emissions to make sure that the global temperatures do not rise beyond 1.5 degrees. So you make a commitment. You make a commitment of the short term. You make a commitment of the long term in terms of how you're going to cut down the carbon emissions. There are terms like Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, which the industry is talking about. Again, today is not the forum, because otherwise it will become a gyan just for this area. That's not the intent out here, because we are setting the stage for the panel. That's what we are doing. So Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions is what industry is worried about, talking about. My morning conversations also over the coffee were over the Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions only with the panelists. I have given a very simple term to it. याद रखने में आसानी होती है. Again, as an engineer, we used to read these thick books we had to remember. So याद करने का तरीका रखते थे. तो what I refer to as Scope 1, Scope 2 is my emissions, and Scope 3 is our emissions. So Scope 1, Scope 2 is which comes in my prerogative directly as a building owner, and Scope 3 is the one where you and I both are involved in terms of the emissions. So where, let's say, you are coming to meet me, that becomes our emissions that we are worrying about. That's what, in simplistic terms, the Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. I also came across this fantastic tool called CREM. One of the developers called me and said that, and incidentally, they were developing a hotel too. So hotel was part of the development, where they said, can you tell me where my project stands? And the CREM was all about analyzing the project in terms of the climate risk, which consists of two parts: the physical risk, which is the natural disasters or the extreme weather elements, and the transitional risk. That means as the codes and standards change, will my building be outdated during the lifespan? So if my lifespan of a building is 50 years, will my building last that lifespan with the standards and codes we're following? Or the government is going to tell me, आप outdated हो गए, इसको demolish करिए या इसको renovate करिए, because that presents a risk to that project. So that's another area we were asked for. So things like this, there are many more. I don't want to get into that, but this is what our customers are asking. If our customers are asking, it impacts you and me. The net zeros that we are speaking about today, suddenly the net zero has become a big thing. I do voluntary work for Indian Green Building Council in terms of the net zero energy rating system. I chaired that net zero energy, net zero water, and Sadeep here chaired the net zero carbon, the rating system which exists there. Incidentally, we formed that net zero energy rating system, came out in 2018. From 2018 till 2020, we had only 9 projects which went for the rating. 9 projects. मोदी साहब 2021 में बोल के आए थे इसके बारे में. 2021 he spoke about this, and between 2020 and 2022 we have 100 projects which are being from 9 to 100. So you can see the interest that it has generated, and unfortunately none of them is a hotel industry. So we do want to understand why is the hospitality industry so reluctant in terms of adopting so that's net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste becomes a reality if you have to talk about carbon. So the net zero buildings are not about design, constructions, but is also about operations, and hospitality industry is big in terms of operations, because that's where we find the best operation practices. Amongst whatever is happening, that's the best operation practices. People are talking of performance-based design. This is something again in the design industry we are seeing, where some of the tenders are saying that produce, make sure that when the building is constructed, this is what we are doing. There's something called carbon labeling being talked about, the environmental information. We are talking about getting the execution right the first time itself. The reason is every time you make a change, you're using more material, and that material comes with a embodied carbon. Now, going to the site and saying isko tod do, isko dobara bana do is going to be a little more expensive affair in terms of carbon. And that's where the technologies like BIM, AR, VR, modular constructions are being talked about a lot in the country today. IoT AI is here to stay. You are hearing these words again and again. Chat GPTs. Why are they suddenly making a lot of waves? It's because if you have to operate, if you get your operational carbon right, relying on human is good, but where is that human? How many of you as hotel operators or building owners can say that my hotel, my building operations are most reliable? Because you are dependent on a human element. And that's why the IoT AIs are now coming in to make the operation more realistic or more and more efficient. The shift has begun at this point of time. All the rating systems, whether it's coming from international or India, are shifting towards what we call performance-based. You demonstrate and you get your rating, not what you design and you get a rating. So far, the green building ratings are all about design, get a rating and go away. How the building performs, not worry about it. That doesn't work anymore with the new rating systems. You don't have to design, you have to actually operate, demonstrate, and then you get rated for it. So all your net zero ratings are all about it. ISHRAE, which is the Indian Society of Air Conditioning Engineers, created a building energy performance standard, which was about the energy performance only. Net zero energy rating system, water, waste, carbon, resiliency are all about actual operation at this point. There is as we talk, there is a new ECBC which is undertaken. It is called ECSBC, and all of us who are associated with the buildings would know that ECBC is a mandatory in 20+ states at this point in time. Energy efficiency. So far, an ECBC talked about only energy efficiency. The ECSBC is Energy Conservation Sustainability Building Code, is going to talk about water, waste, energy, indoor environmental quality, commissioning, materials, site selections. It talks about everything, all aspects of a building design, be it hotel, be it hospital, or be it commercial building. So hotels are very well covered out there, and you would be, as hoteliers, as members who are associated with the hospitality industry, are going to get impacted. This ECSBC is scheduled to, the draft is scheduled to get finished in next about 70 days from now. So by this year end, this document is a reality which each one of us will follow. So that's another thing happening, and carbon is a placeholder here in this code also. So I just like to end by saying that decarbonization is a reality in whichever way. Some of us call it a fad. I've heard those also at some of the conferences. But whatever it is, it's a reality. It is here. And those of us who do not adapt our businesses to it, be it design, be it operations, be it construction, whatever we do, I think we would be in a lot of trouble. So thank you very much. What I'll do is, I'll now invite the panelists. I think that sets the tone from where we are going in terms of discussions. And the 5 panelists that we have here, here, I've already done the introductions for you. So please, Billy, sir, it's for being here in the morning. As you can see, conference is right now warming up. So you're one of the early starters in terms of the discussions, but thank you for joining. 2 of you have flown down especially from Delhi, Billy and Yash, for doing that. 3 of you are from Mumbai. So let's start. I think amongst us we have first the architect. He knows that the first question will always go to him. Being the architect and being the reason why why the buildings come up the way they come up. And I've had very interesting discussions with the architects also. Last week was no different, where our friend from Hyderabad, Srinivas, was there. He was quite critical in terms of what the architects can do and what they're not doing at this point. But that's so. Sandeep, let's start by saying that, especially with respect to hospitality industry, where we have where the embodied carbon as well as the operational carbon are the highest. What would your recommendation be? That how do you think a project should really start, and where are we going wrong when we do what we do today? Because what should be done as a designer when an architect will come up?
Opening presentation was awesome. It has set the tone right. You've given a very nice introduction to the topic of today's panel discussion. Thanks for posing first question to me. From architect lenses, I always feel that there is where the whole story begins. So it starts from the design programming. Many of the times I feel that an effective passive design and a contextual design plays a very big role, because you are giving a birth to a process of a built environment. If everything is correct at that stage, you have a lesser efforts to be engaged at the later stage where you start applying the active measures. So I'm actually glad I'm seeing hospitality industry is the one which is growing in a much more organized way. For example, when we were designing the hotels for the brands, they gave us the indices. Okay, per key we would not want you to increase more than 70 square meter. That actually
so per key what? Sorry?
Per key. Suppose if you are doing a 200 key hotel, or if you are doing a 300 key hotel, they had an indices in place that this hotel will not make a good business case if, as an architect, you design an inefficient hotel. So your target is 70 square meter per key. So if I am doing a 200 key hotel, I cannot go above 140,000 square meter.
Understood.
So this is something which is absolutely a delight as an architect to understand, because first thing is to optimize what you are building. You build inefficient structure and then try to make it green or then try to make it more sustainable doesn't make sense. So how do we as a promoter, developer, architect and the stalwart engineers like you together reach to that threshold where we all are convinced that we are not building a 1 square more than what it is required? See, luxury is again a very subjective concept. Luxury need not be always leading to a spacious thing. Today,
so you're saying the first starting point is the right design brief.
Right design brief.
Because if the brief is wrong or brief is incorrect, the starting point would be wrong.
And also if the brief is open-ended with only the aspirational wisdom, also you may line into an area where you may come up with a beautiful piece of architecture, a marvel, but when you test it from the GHG emission point of view or a sustainability, it will not pass. But today, I'm glad that amongst all other industries, IT industry and the hospitality industry are the ones, probably they have a lot of pressure for their business case or a revenue ROI, it's doing pretty well.
So that's part of the operation, that's part of the brief which came from the client. What about the architecture as such? What is it that would help us, that we should do and what we are not doing to help us to go towards?
I'm coming to that. So that is where we always test that the design program given to us, is it optimum? Is it sensible? That's the first step, and we spend good amount of time on that because that forms a basis. Then together as architects, engineer, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, firefighting, environment, landscape, facade, lighting, again that consortium and that collaborative strength must ensure that we have reached to a threshold of our passive design, our orientation, our microclimate responsive design, everything that we do. But people tend to pass that phase very hurriedly and then they depend more on active measures. Naturally, then you are spending more energies, you are spending more resources, and that will lead to...
What are those passive measures that you would recommend?
You have to form your own indices. Like we are talking about today, 15 watt per square meter for the facade. We are talking about all those indices have been derived out of the experiences, out of the research and analysis where the wealth of madam's knowledge would come on picture. That is something that has to be spread widely. I see that is there only with the branded hotels. The people who are doing hotels in tier 2 and tier 3, they are more aspirational. People are not really looking at that particular indices as the basis on which they should work. So I think there is a lot that needs to be done there, where
Is there enough being done by the architects in terms of planning at this point of time?
Yes and no, both.
Okay.
So I would not hesitate to confess that our own fraternity is also quite slow in responding this particular aspect, where the behavior of a built environment, its efficiencies and its actual indices in terms of energy consumptions and the carbon emissions is yet very low.
Sure.
So there is where I think there's a huge space together. We have to work in that space, make sure that we catch them young in the universities and colleges. You will be surprised to know climate change literacy is completely absent. The new education policy of central government of India has complete absence on the climate change literacy. So we all need to work from that particular point. And I think it plays a very big role at the design stage. So there's a lot that I can talk, but
thanks,
this is
Sandeep.
something which is...
Okay, let's make it a little more interesting, the whole panel. Let this question not be to anybody in particular. Let me put this in center. I think all of you are experts, and you're an architect too, and you become half architect over a period of time. So I'm sure you'd like to pick up. You want to say a lot, but so let's do this. These questions are in the center. You pick up the way you like. If you feel that you would add more, you want to cut down, please feel free to do that. Not only that, what we are also going to do is, if any of the audience members would also like to participate in terms of asking questions, let's do that. Let's ask now. What's the point of asking when that moment is gone, whatever we are discussing here? So let me know, just raise your hand. Let's make this more interactive. Yeah, you wanted to add something here, Millie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, very nice points you have kind of put forward, Sandeep ji, and particularly Ashish, your presentation was very, very detailed, and you brought about a lot of interconnected issues. So particularly because I have been working very extensively through the lens of rating systems.
Right.
So now, in addition, though we are talking about or discussing decarbonization, which means, like reducing the carbon intensity and, kind of offsetting through different measures of renewable, etc. But we have also added layers, and which is particularly very key for the hospitality sector, the layer of resilience, the layer of health and wellness. You would see that, even some of the key brands like ITC, they talk about responsible luxury. So luxury is ingrained. You cannot do away with that. No client will come. So which means that you have to provide better health and well-being. You have to be resilient. So if I kind of be a bit granular, suppose you have to make a resilient structure in a coastal zone.
Could you define resiliency?
Yeah, so you are anticipating certain kind of, risks which can be happening, which could be physical risk, which could be climate risks, which could be man-made risk, and you take precautions to avoid that. Say a hotel made in a coastal zone.
So how does that concern with the
decarbonization? Yes. Suppose if you are, kind of constructing in a coastal region, so where it may be flood prone, and later on maybe there's a sea level rise or, tsunami, etc. So you have to build the structure in a way that you do not get affected, and you have to predict those risks. So that will add to the carbon intensity, right? Because you will make your structure more resilient. Then if you're anticipating that your temperature would rise in future, then maybe you build in redundancy to the air conditioning system. You over design it. So that in a way conflicts your decarbonization in the immediate term. Similarly, if you are looking at a better indoor air quality from health perspective, that will also, if you're not doing it in a balanced way, that will add to a carbon. So I think this integrated approach is crucial, which has to be the, bottom line for all design.
Wow. So let me ask a follow-up question on this one. This was too much for me to digest. How does the rating systems address?
Yes.
Because, today the rating systems are
Correct.
sort of a backbone for a design also.
Yes.
If that be the case, are the rating systems adequately addressing, and how do they address?
Yeah, so that is, the mainstay of, suppose in LEED, we are getting into the version 5 development. So this integrated approach where we tie up resilience, health, well-being, and energy efficiency in an integrated framework to give an optimized design will be the key thing.
Okay.
So it is not decarbonization as the only goal. You have to be safe, you have to be healthy.
Okay. So Yash, you want to pick this up? Okay.
Just this whole thing about the integrated approach that ma'am was just talking about. Rating is one thing. There's also licensing, and unless you're conscientious, see, there's two parts. One is being conscientious and one is being knowledgeable. You should be knowledgeable also. You should have the correct information that will drive the the savings in this entirely integrated approach. So if there is a licensing system that is linked to ratings and it has to be renewed on an annual basis, then you will be driven to achieve those goals, rather than the whole thing about rating is that ek baar le liya, once you've taken that rating, then you can show that we are rated this. But if you're
I think since the discussion has gone in that direction, let me pick that up also. Let's be realistic. Hospitality is one of the slowest in terms of going for green, adopting the green. We talk about it a lot. Sorry, guys, don't mind, but have been associated with more than 500 hotels now. So there is a reality in the statement. So coming back here, so is the slowest to adopt, largest water consumption, largest energy consumption in terms of the EPI. Green itself remains poorly implemented because it's more of a greenwash that we all continue to do. 12 billion to dikhaya maine, but kitna usme se realistically green hai, I think we all know the story. What do you think about the decarbonization with this realistic picture that we have here? What can we do to drive it? Yes, Rumi sir.
Our experience is that the design is a fundamental premise where you start your decarbonization journey, and taking it forward, perception of the owner, perception of the operator, the staff, and at a design stage, how that thing is put across is very, very important. I'll cite one or two examples. Like, people are today gung-ho about solar. They said, okay, a lot of people have got some misconception, net zero, put solar and finish off. Everything is, hunky-dory in it. So it doesn't go that way. For your information, very shortly you will see a net zero hotel, that is Jackson Inn, where I am associated, and we are trying to do it. But let me tell you at the same time the challenges which are being faced. See, as per the Maharashtra Electric Regulatory Committee, we want to go whole hog for putting the solar. They say you cannot put solar more than the connected load of your hotel, number one. If I want to get into an open access, sorry, it is not permissible because your connected load should be 1 megawatt. See, these are the challenges where we actually practically working. But there is always a positive side of it. So there is a green power available, okay, where you can source at an additional cost of around 70 paise per unit, that differential. So these are the things which are coming up, at least in Maharashtra, where I have been working with a lot of organization. Second aspect is at the time of design, when you're talking, a lot of things have been talked about passive systems and all that thing, I'm not getting into it. Being an active system, we are from the engineering side, laundry, water usage. Why this water has not come up? Because whenever you tell anybody, I don't even know, I'm only getting one invoice on which the water is there, or the water is so subsidized. So actually there is a value to the water, there is not a price. A lot of people ask me, what is my ROI? Yesterday only I had to reply. I said, sorry sir, how can I work on an ROI on a water? So these are the challenges where one has to understand. But when the water is not available, that time you actually de-risk your business by understanding with some sort of an alternative source of water, etc., etc. The second big ticket item, just 1 minute, is a laundry. People are operating boilers. In one of the organizations, in one of the hotel, spending 2 lakh rupees per month to operate a boiler. There is an alternative. You go for an agri-waste operated boiler. And there you have got a clean fuel, green fuel, you decarbonize. At the same time, it's a win-win situation on your costing also. So these are some of the things which are happening.
So you are saying technologies exist,
yes,
design matters, and there are solutions available in the given framework also that can be implemented. Which, do they make business sense also?
Yes, because at this time of your design, if you are doing a greenfield project, or even we do a lot of retrofits also,
so Rohit,
one has to make a business case.
Why are they not done at the design stage itself? Why is Mr. Rumi required to come in and do it at the operation stage? Sorry.
It's not that it's not being done. It's just that it's not cohesive. If you had to look at, the simple things, if you are to look at operational carbon, the measuring systems that will define how you are going annually, that many times is not put in place. We talk about a building management system. How many building management systems after we have implemented actually give you a dashboard department wise? Say for instance, as I was saying, the laundry. we don't know how much water that laundry is consuming.
Right.
A simple thing like an IoT based water meter would give you that information
So
per
why don't
laundry
you
for
put
the
it at the
kitchen.
design stage only?
It has to be done, sir.
Why is it not being done?
Again, awareness, probably that, the
So-
process that defines that these things should be there. Again, related to a license, and again, see, it has to be, there has to be a stick and
So
there has
does
to
the
be an
brief which is
incentive.
coming from hotel operators, because all of the hotel operators give you a design brief. Does it ask for it adequately?
It does. But the thing is that when that input cost is weighed, many times it is set aside by the
So that is a
owner.
second priority. Those meters are a
Yeah,
second
yes.
priority.
That goes on the
And
back
they are
burner.
what we call
Actually,
a
the
value
cost is not
engineering.
that much. It's just let aside. It's that we let's deal with the bigger ticket
And
things.
बाद में
and then
operation के side में डाल देंगे
कर
उसको
लेंगे,
वापस
हाँ.
वो.
See, I feel at this design stage, if you see the whole cost of your project, correct me if I'm wrong, what is this cost? This is hardly minuscule. The only thing is
सर
कि
पता
it's a
नहीं,
conviction.
मुझे तो ये बताया जाता है हमारी फीस से शुरू करके छोटी छोटे कट से ही बड़ा समुंदर बनता है. तो
yeah.
स्टार्ट विद द कंसल्टेंट, फिर आगे जाते हैं, फिर देखते हैं क्या
Correct.
होता है. राइट सर? So चलिए, खैर, let's come back to Yash, because he gave me a question which I was saving it. I wanted you guys to. He said, decarbonization need for the global and Indian infrastructure, especially hard to abate sectors. And hard to abate is right here in front of you, hospitality. Your views, Yash.
So thank you, Ashish ji. So I think first of all, before I answer that question, let me throw some facts. Globally, the carbon emission, every $1 billion that we spend on the construction industry, we generate 1 million ton of carbon emissions. And Ashish ji talked about the embodied carbon and the operational carbon, the built environment comprising about 40% of the overall GHG emission. Now, if I break that down further, the embodied carbon percentage is around 23%, and the operational carbon is around 70% plus. Now, in the next 20 to 30 years, the annual spend on the construction industry is going to be, currently we are spending about $11 trillion every year globally. And this is going to be a threefold spend in the next 20 to 30 years. So we are going to be about 32 to 34 trillion dollar annually. So you can imagine the amount of carbon emission which is going to come from the global construction industry. So estimates suggest it's going to be around 100 gigaton of carbon emission annually. So definitely the responsibility is much higher on the construction fraternity.
And how much of it do you think India would count for? Because we are the fastest growing country.
Yes, so India is one of the, I think, in the top 3 geographies with the highest construction spend. The construction market is equivalent to the entire Europe put together for the next 10 to 30 years, 20 years. So if you look at Indians' construction industry spend, the capital outlay by the central government, it was 7.5 lakh crore. It has been recently increased to 10 lakh crore, and it's across all the sectors, including the hospitality, building construction, oil and gas, refineries, steel, manufacturing, and so on. So you can imagine the kind of carbon footprint that India is also going to generate if we do not address the problem right now and start creating solutions for the whole life cycle carbon assessment. Also, the another fact is the point that embodied carbon right now would seem to be a smaller share of the total carbon emission, but in the next 20 years, it's going to be equivalent to operational carbon. So your operational carbon will be 51%, embodied carbon will be almost 49%.
That's in Indian context or global context?
That's a global context. But if you look at the construction spend which is there in Indian market, you can imagine that the embodied carbon in Indian context also will also be equivalent to operational
What
carbon.
I have heard, and correct me, Yash, is a lot of people talking about embodied carbon is a bigger problem in India because we are building at this point of time. Operational carbon is more of a problem for the developed countries because they already finished building it.
Yes. So India, because at the pace that the infrastructure is to be put up, and the clients are becoming extremely demanding about the cost, the minimum cost, minimum timeline. In fact, even if you look at the hospitality sector also, I mean, nobody would want to lose 1 day of revenue, to get in terms of getting the project delayed. With the pace at which the infrastructure is supposed to be set up with all these government programs, PM Gati Shakti, the MMLPs, and the other large programs, it becomes even more challenging for Indian context to tackle this problem right now. Because the clients need to be much more aware that it's not just about the time and cost, but it's also about the carbon that you are going to generate. Because by the time the project gets operationalized and commissioned, half of your carbon is already emitted. So that means that whatever spending is happening today in Indian industry, it has to be done right the first time. Because operational carbon, there are measures that you can still improvise during the life cycle of the project. You can reduce through energy efficiency measures and other measures. But embodied carbon is something which is going to be...
So Yash, tell us something more about the rules and regulations that are coming up in Indian context, which our industry needs to be aware about and not do the business the way as usual.
I think the policy think tanks around the Niti Aayog and the ministries, they are thinking on the same lines in terms of having carbon limits on new projects which are coming up, especially the ones which are going to be funded by the government. Also the fact that in terms of taxation, the government should be thinking, they are not yet, but they should be thinking about putting tax on, at a certain threshold. If the carbon exceeds for any new building, there should be a tax applicable on that. When it comes to lenders and private equities, there is going to be a provision for green loans, green subsidies. Because even if you look at the hospitality industry, you can look at, it's a private equity intensive market as well. So the largest of the private equities, you can ask them that, if they are investing in the hospitality sector, how much of carbon are they financing? And it's going to be difficult for them to answer because there are limited measures right now.
So just the last question, I know you're hijacking that right now, but I do want to ask this question because it has a bearing on this. So far, the thought process has been जैसे कि अभी रूमी साहब ने बोला, solar लगा दो, हो गया काम. And this is what the current thinking is. Solar लगाया, carbon footprint कम हो गया. Is this the right way to go? Is this the only way to go and is the only right way to go?
Not at all.
Well,
It's not the
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
It's not the only way to go. It's good. It's good to do it, of course. But it has to be a cohesive approach which takes a number of factors. It's not the only thing, right? There are other things that you can do. Just taking on that first point that Sandeep ji had put forward. If there is a regulation that defines the per key square meter area and that you have to abide by that regulation, there should also be that regulation that allows, say for instance, if an Uday Vilas wants to do 200 square meters per key, fine, you do it. But then you have to compensate for that in the right manner that will take care of this additional thing.
So you want to say
Yeah,
something? Because I have a question on that. Yeah.
What about the embodied carbon of the solar panels also?
Just got to ask
Yes.
the same thing. Thank you.
So, unless you reduce at source, you do, linear construction, you use local supply chains, etc. You cannot bring down the embodied
taken,
and the
Yash.
overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not just about carbon offsetting. Okay. Otherwise, it's gonna lead to carbon washing. The greenwash concept. So it's about what's inside, what's there in the project. That needs to be reduced. So rather than offsetting, strategies should be rather aligned towards
This is
reducing.
what I wanted the message to go down the line.
Also, the backward industries now, because the hard to abate sectors that you had mentioned. If you look at the backward integrated industries, the cement, the steel, aluminum, glazing, and all, those industries are actually difficult to decarbonize right now because the way they are manufactured, they are highly dependent on the technology, the way the iron is manufactured, the steel is manufactured. So unless those technologies evolve, we will be continuing to depend on those sectors.
Thanks,
actually.
Yash. Yeah, Rumi sir.
Yeah, there are other two things. One is a misconception people have that by putting the solar, people save energy. It's only offsetting, number one. Second thing is, as you are rightly discussing in your presentation, there is a performance-based now rating systems are coming. Lot of time we see that solar has been installed, but they are not performing as they are intended. And people are not even aware. That's the bigger, aspect about it. So people know, and it is their investment. When I tell the client it is your investment, and ultimately you have to get the best returns out of it. So
Okay.
these are some of the
Thanks,
challenges.
Thanks. So I just want to go back. There's a question which is coming up here. We'll come to that. I want to go back to our architect friend. He's my friend. I can know his name, but our architect friend here, he represents the community at this point. We spoke about you get a brief about area per square that has to be done, room per square meter for the whole of the thing. But have you ever got a brief to talk about आप जो होटल डिजाइन करेंगे उसका एनर्जी इतनी होगी, उसका वाटर इतना होगा per square meter? Have you ever got such a brief?
Yeah. So that's exactly where I was coming to. Basically, now this particular exercise needs to raise the bar. If you will see the indices that we used to get 20 years back, even on a sustainability basis, were very low and very poor. People were talking about a basic fundamental thing that they require from the built environment point of view. Now, once I think the regulatory has a lot of power, because regulatory, once they put it into a regulation, like today in a bylaws, all the indices for the energy performance, the water efficiencies have come, which was not the case 10-15 years back. STP was not mandatory. Nothing was mandatory. Everything was an open ground. But slowly and steadily that push, which came from the consumer also. And I think that we need to accelerate, as correctly said by Yash. We need to go to the root cause analysis and see the life cycle of that particular built environment, how it will behave from the energy consumption and so on. I'm happy. Now we are receiving the design brief where they very clearly say the consciousness of a designer and their consortium with respect to the embodied carbon, and also a focus on giving us the exact values of what it would be for the operational carbon. These are the briefs we are getting in last 6 months. And that has actually pushed many of the architectural fraternity don't even know what are the clients saying.
That's my point. I had to start my presentation by first talking about the fundamentals.
But need is a mother of innovation.
Right.
There is no dearth of talent or ability
Right.
here. It's
Right.
all about that awareness.
Sure.
And I'm personally thinking that since our Prime Minister has signed with the COP, I would not be surprised if in 1 year the carbon credits will be given to all the project proponents, and they will have to by default learn,
Including hospitality?
including everybody.
So hospitality is the largest consumer.
In 2 years, this is what I am presuming, at least for the government funded buildings, may it be hospitality or whichever sector, the carbon numbers will
What do you feel, Yash? Is that going to be reality? Or is it too early?
It's too early.
Too early, okay.
to say.
Millie, what do you feel? From a code standard, is this what you're going to go to right now? But that's where we are going.
Yeah.
And how much time would you predict and how many years from now would that happen? What's the
I personally feel, see, today you are seeing there is a paradigm shift in terms of the technology, the application that architects are working. You and me know that we are 100% Revit compliant. So we have the building information modeling to do. So there are tools. So I do not think the industry will also be ready to take this kind of a challenges, because everything is happening at a supersonic speed.
So for the benefit of our friends here from hospitality industry, what tsunami is going to hit them and how much time the tsunami is going to hit them?
My prediction, within 5 years, all of them has to be poised to even retrofit
Right.
their existing hotels.
5 to
Otherwise,
10 years. 5 to 10
Between-
years.
within a
Within
decade.
5 and
Yeah,
within
it's
this
reasonable.
coming
2030
decade.
is what it looks like.
5 years
that
is reasonable.
The tsunami will hit, and that's when we are touching a $7 trillion mark also, hopefully. Wow. एक just last before I come to you. Just yes, ma'am. आपके पास में आ जाता हूँ. Just
Ashish,
एक question.
I'll just take-
मुझे इतना they're putting so much things into my mind right now. I have so many questions. Yeah.
I'll just take 1 minute to add to the numbers, which everyone should know. Today, the global GHG emission is 8.4 billion. And with the historical growth of 1.3% every year, by 2050, it will go to 14.5 billion. That means the temperature rise will be more than 6 degrees centigrade. Half the world will
मुझे तो
become
एक तो पहले
unlivable.
बिलियन में जीरो नहीं पता
So the
कितने होते हैं।
abatement-
और आप 8.4 और इतनी बड़ी बड़ी बातें कर रहे हो, बट व्हाट यू सेड वाज द नंबर। हम यहाँ 1.5 डिग्री लिमिट करने के लिए कर रहे हैं, सारी कॉप जो हो रही है 1.5 डिग्री के लिए हो रही है, आप 6 डिग्री की बात कर रहे हो तो वर्ल्ड ही खत्म हो जाएगा।
No, but this is an actual fact. It's not me. I'm saying. This is
So
actual fact.
it also presents a risk to the businesses, because I have had clients who are right now talking to me that, and they are common clients that many of us have, they are saying they are evaluating their projects which they are building now in terms of climate risk that it presents to them.
That is, so
Silence.
then as soon as you do that, your decarbonization goes for a toss.
Absolutely.
Right. That's very interesting. एक last चीज before I give it to them. I can't resist. I'm like, वो मुझसे लेना चाहते हैं माइक, मैं देना नहीं चाहता यहाँ पे. So last question also before I come back again to you later. Design life. We have always spoken about in our right context 50 years design life for a building. This is दिमाग में चला हुआ है ये. And the design life also, design comes with a embodied carbon, because every time you set up a building, it's embodied carbon. Is it a time that as a brief, we start looking at design life differently? Why not a 500-year design life, which is what our earlier buildings used to be designed for? What is the thought process on that?
I'll put a different dimension to this. You see the Qatar Stadium, 100%, not 100%, but to great extent it was recyclable. Today we are moving away from constructing the building to manufacturing the building. Look at the automobile. Everything happens off-site, prefabricated, state-of-art with minimum wastage. It gets assembled. So building industry is also moving towards off-site prefabricated technology, where buildings, if their purpose is gone, they will be repurposed by recycling, reusing, and
Sure. Let's have more views.
That's
If
what is
anybody
going
else
to
would
happen.
like to add?
It's just happening. It's
Millie, is
happening
this
already.
something which the rating will also push for?
Yeah, definitely. Indirectly it already talks about it in terms of adaptive reuse, circularity, and so many concepts.
Thank you. So I'll go to our audience here. Sir, please identify yourself and then the question, not the remarks question.
Myself, Akshay Sheth. I'm coming from the interior part of Gujarat, that is Rajkot. Again, sir, sorry, but it is not exactly a question, but the kind of things which my observation in the other part of area. See, I'll just brief you that in last couple of years we did around 1400 keys, and it is ranging, the maximum keys which is there in the hotel is somewhere around 100 or 110. So that is the average size of the hotels which we have done. Frankly speaking, unfortunately, out of this 1,400 keys which we have done, only 400 keys which we have done where I personally feel getting a certification of architecture or practicing an architecture or any designing doesn't make you eligible to design hotels or a similar buildings. So can't we have a system wherein a licensing, like what we are having, you are getting a license to drive a two-wheeler or a car or a LMB. So why can't we have a system wherein like I see a great sense of knowledge, there are a lot of concerns which I see from the people, our panel people around here. But this doesn't reach to those people who are actually making. Last 2.5 months, I received around 36 inquiries where people are wanted to do hotels. And none of them are actually hoteliers. Not only that, out of which the designers, the team who are supposed to be designing those premises doesn't hold any such knowledge.
So that's exactly I was coming at. The situation will come whereby you will be pushed unless and until you know what needs to be done for the hotel. As he says, the law may come, you will not be certified to be a hotel promoter.
Okay. So, Yash, can you comment on this part? Because from a policy perspective especially, this is a reality. This is what I was also trying to hint at. बड़ी बड़ी बातें हम यहाँ कर लेते हैं, ग्रीन वॉश कर डाला हमने 20 साल में, but real implementation has been a problem because everything was design based. अब बारी आ गई ऑपरेशन की, demonstration की, and दिल्ली और मुंबई जैसी जगह में तो we can talk about it. What happens now? What he's saying.
Yeah, I think it's a function of I think somebody talked about the literacy around climate change, but I will zoom into it, and it's about literacy around carbon also. That also has to go up. And when it comes to, again, from the policy side, there has to be linkage to the business angle also. Because unless the owners or the developer see the business implication of this and then they drive it accordingly, then the impetus will not be there. for decarbonization, even in the hotel industry. So whether the government push for this in the policy agenda or the owners push this from a business agenda, this all has to come together in a collaborative effort.
And it will come together because the regulations are moving in that direction. Because I'm reading the topic, it says decarbonization, the urgency and need in Indian context. So what we are saying are current today's problem. But what you are saying is within next less than a decade time, the regulations will drive it. Whether it's a Rajkot or whether it is Mumbai, your problems are going to be same because carbon emissions are same there.
Yes, because India, I think, is going to learn from the West. If you look at the European market, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, they are already ahead of us in terms of implementing the policies around embodied carbon, and they've actually imposed limits per square meter. This much of kg CO2 needs to be there as a maximum limit. In fact, if you look at US, California has just recently imposed a law. It's called, I think, Buy Clean California Act, which limits the embodied carbon emission limits for the residential building. The EPDs have become mandatory
For residential buildings, that is a place where
So for any building which is more than 10,000 square
And
feet,
who's responsible for the residential building? Is the owner himself, building owner
the
himself?
developers who are actually
So what
building
happens to the people like you and me who buy the house and stay there?
So for tenants and for buyers, there are no policies or no regulations right now. It's largely on the developer side and on the material manufacturer side. Okay. So on the material manufacturer, the EPDs have become mandatory. In India also, we should have such regulations that the EPDs have to be mandatory when you are actually purchasing the material, especially for the if you look at hospitality industry. You have materials which are common across projects, and especially if it's a leading chain, the scalability is at much higher level. So even if you select a small item which has a lesser carbon footprint, the overall impact would be significantly higher.
Okay.
Overall.
So Yash taken, and just for everybody's benefit, environmental product declaration, the EPD that he's talking about, is like जो आप खाना खाने जाते हो उसके अंदर nutritional value जो दी होती है, इतना calcium है, इतना fat है, इतना ये है. इसी तरह से the product manufacturers, and many of us are product manufacturers also here, you'll be required to declare your EPD in a given foreseeable future from now that's coming. Millie, you wanted to say something? And I'm going to move after this too, because there's so much embodied that we have spoken about thanks to you guys there. And Silent Engineer is having a good time. So I want to go to him to talk about operational carbon after this. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just one point on the EPDs. EPDs was introduced, by the lead rating systems way back. But the issue is about, getting the EPDs and getting program operators to get those. And it's very, very expensive. Like per EPD, it may be per product about 20 lakh rupees. So, which means it's impossible for the MSMEs or other manufacturers to do. So it only gets restricted to a few key products. And that also, is monopolization. So I think we have to have also certain things which are more, kind of locally ingrained, and regulatory processes are, like the way we have IGBC. So even within the IGBC, you should have some basic, not going up to the level of EPD, but certain basic numbers or calculators for embodied carbon calculations.
Sure. You took the point of calculators. Very interesting. Hai. Is there something which for us as a common people from the industry, are there any calculators available for us to go and see कि हमारा अभी carbon क्या है, because ये tsunami जो आने वाली है, how do we prepare ourselves for it? Do you see any carbon calculators which are there from embodied for operation, anything that is available?
Yes, there is a LCA plus software which allows you to, it's catching up very fast and it's become very user friendly. You can go on their website. It allows you to self-navigate, to have a basic knowledge. So I was so glad when I heard a lady talking about it just a couple of days. I was panelist and it was a good knowledge for me also to learn. So these kind of tangible tools are very aggressively going to become available for everybody, whereby they can actually calculate the carbon footprint of what they are
Sure.
doing.
So Yash, I want you to give a stab and then Rohit also, because जो operational carbon की बात हो रही है, how do you use it, Rohit? I want to know that. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think it's the calculators are there. They are emerging, and Indian market is also evolving. They are adapting to what the global industry has to offer. One-click LC is there, EC3 is there. There are other calculators. But what's important is what goes behind those calculators. If you look at the material database, the carbon coefficient database, the transport emission database, that's important because the carbon coefficient database is not there for the Indian industry right now. We are largely relying on the international databases. For Indian context, first of all, the carbon database has to evolve. It has to be benchmarked, and then when the new projects will come up, they can use that as a reference for calculating the carbon footprint.
Sure, Rohit.
Sir, operationally, then that is, if you want to look at reduction, there's two aspects to it. One is the maintenance of the systems that you've already implemented, but if you had to take one step back further, what are the things that you can do to make the baseline itself low? I mean, there are so many technologies that we could think of adopting. Say, for instance, slab cooling. Where the passive way of design, reducing the glass, improving the performance of the glass in design. So once you take both these things together, then we can look at some sizable or tangible improvement in the operational carbon consumption.
Are your clients ready to listen to what this aspect of design is?
The mindset is changing. The thought process
In
is changing.
hospitality also?
Yes, in hospitality also.
Okay, thank you. Ma'am, you wanted to ask.
Thanks. I'm Shibani Jain from Baya. About the other aspects of the hotel industry, which is working with local materials, working with local art, the local culture, preventing migration, building livelihoods. What about that? Does that play a role in? It certainly plays a role in sustainability, but does it have anything to do with decarbonization, or even if it's to do with sustainability? If anybody can throw some light on this, it would be really helpful.
If you are using local material, your transport costs, are reduced. So your scope 3 emissions immediately come down. If you are using local labor, you are again, you have to look at it, from the overall ESG perspective. If you're looking at your social fabric gets enhanced, their income levels go up. So all of them directly or indirectly contribute to the economy of that place. I mean, to the ESG
Rumi
goals.
sir, you want to pick up?
Yeah, in continuation with what Millie said, I have been working with a hotel that is located in a remote area ahead of Pune called Fulton. It's a really remote area, and it is really heartwarming to understand that the people, those who are engineers managing the chillers, the air conditioning systems, the people who are the front staff, they are all from that locality. And when I had to interact with them, they feel so good, that okay, we have been given the opportunity in this life. Had this structure or has this hotel not been there, I don't know what would have been happened to our livelihood and our family and all that thing. So it's an upcoming thing. So definitely it has got a lot of far-reaching impact on your livelihood and the social fabric in and around that place.
Yes, you wanted to say.
Yeah, I would say that what Millie has spoken about on the transportation and logistics cost, but it also has an impact on the carbon emission because logistics and supply chain becomes an important part of any project. So if you are actually using the locally sourced material, your carbon footprint in transporting that material from the origin to the project site reduces significantly. Just to give you some facts, if you are actually getting a material through air freight, the carbon emission is actually 60 times than if you are getting it through a sea route. If you are getting it by a rail, it's 20 times. If you're getting it by a road, it's 10 times. So the owners or the developers have to make this choice in a balanced manner in terms of what material to procure, at what cost to procure, and what is the carbon that you are
बहुत सिंपल है. इटालियन लगाना है, सतवारियों लगाना है, तभी तो 5-star होटल बनना है. तो ये और
but that's where the conscious choice.
Sure. Let's hear this. बिकॉज बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है.
Yes.
शिवानी जी ने बोला क्वेश्चन, हमने उसको आंसर दे दिया. लगाना तो सतवारी और इटालियन ही हमने.
Ashish,
So, let's hear.
I'll just take 1 minute on this.
Ashish, I'm Rajesh Nair. Yeah. So I'm also a project manager, having my own business in project management. Rightly said, you said the developers have to, put their points down that on sourcing the local material. But what about the brands? All of us are in the hotel industry. Almost all the international brands are very reluctant to use the local materials. Now come to the, yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. There are challenges, but as I said, need is the first step of innovation. And I really appreciate that was one of my topic which I wrote you also, the contextual architecture. So even in urban context now, we are looking out for a 1 square kilometer sustainability. So any hotel should have all their resources coming to them within 1 kilometer from there. The pedestrianized distance. So that will naturally put a less impact on the transportation and so on. Fulton is a great example. But let me tell you, the things will change. Now people like the contextual things. If you put them in a right way, now globally people awareness is also changing. So you are the one as a project manager should start pushing the boundaries and challenge these questions about the brand. But I feel from the monocentric to the polycentric development is...
Rohit, you want to say something?
Just that the sustainability and carbon that we talk about, we tend to underplay or ignore or maybe even miss out the human resource aspect that Rumisa had put up. That if you are able to positively sustain the environment, the area around the development, say for instance, again this hotel thing that he has given in Fulton, it will prevent migration. It will, people will, their livelihood will improve, their way of living will improve. So many other non-embodied carbon.
हम और आप तो इंजीनियर हैं. Let's talk to numbers and let's talk real fact. ये सारी चीजें, sorry, architects और अच्छी लगती हैं, but हम पे नहीं चलती हैं. Let's come back to the real thing. I want to ask you now from an operational carbon. That's where the real thing. यशी ने बोल दिया 50% embodied है, 50% operational है. तो भाई 51 तो हम ही है ना, at the major shareholder हैं. So let's talk about the operational carbon part because ये तो भूल ही गए हम पूरे में. एक सिंपल चीज वो जो मुझे भी समझ में आती है एयर कंडीशनिंग में, वी टॉक अबाउट समथिंग कॉल्ड मिक्स मोड वेंटिलेशन, जहां पे अगर वेदर अच्छा है तो खिड़की खोल दो. जैसे अभी दिल्ली में 14 डिग्री 15 डिग्री 17 डिग्री टेम्परेचर है तो विंडो खोल दो. किसी भी होटल में विंडो तो खुलती नहीं. और स्ट्रेट अवे मेरा कार्बन फुटप्रिंट और आधा ऑपरेशनल कार्बन 50% हो जाता है, हाफ हो जाता है. बट फल्टन में तो नहीं है. सो हाफ हो जाता है जैसे ही मैं विंडो खोल देता हूं. एक सिंपल पंखा लगा देता हूं. ये इतना बड़ा बढ़िया 5 स्टार होटल है, कितने पंखे लगे हैं यहाँ पे. आप में हमने ही डिजाइन किया ना, और ये सब आर्किटेक्ट थे, आप और हम इंजीनियर थे. वो ग्रीन रेटिंग थी, वो कमिश्निंग एजेंट थे, और पंखा एक भी नहीं लगा. रियलिटी थे वो पॉलिसी बना रहे थे. सो ये सारा करने के बाद रियलिटी तो ये है कि हमें एक्चुअली एसी नहीं चाहिए, पंखा चाहिए. पंखे से मेरा काम हो जाएगा. सो व्हाट इज योर थॉट प्रोसेस? आई वांट टू टेक दिस अप from all of you on this.
So that's the thing. That design intent has to come in from the beginning. Once it's done, this hotel is made.
Who will bring that thing?
Sir,
तो आप ही देंगे ना, आप इंजीनियर उस जॉब के.
सर रेगुलेशन देगा सर. अगर आप डंडा नहीं खड़ा करोगे तो फिर वो काम नहीं होगा.
Let's hear that.
If it is optional, unless it makes business sense, it will not be done.
Yeah, see, that's I agree with him. See, because then they will say कि अरे पंखा लगेगा तो कैसा दिखता है. This is a hotel. Can you think of it? How can you even think of it? That will be shot down at a first instance.
तो फिर बात करते रहो कार्बन की जितनी करनी है.
I'm just saying that is one aspect of it. The second part of it is that when you're talking about operations, how many people know under what head their expenses are going in the hotel? Sorry, on the energy front. So this is the starting point. People are not even aware that where they are spending and how much they are spending. So that is the first thing, and they are shying off. Even if you say मीटर लगाओ 5,000 रुपये का, they'll say what is the use? क्या करना है? मेरे को तो बिल ही भरना है. So that mindset, that thing has to really undergo a paradigm shift.
Okay,
Once
let's
that
hear
happens,
more
then
views.
operations
Yeah, so let's hear more views on subject. Yes.
I think it is also to do with the mind shift from the owners and the developers community.
Yes, where did you stay
Regulation
last
is one
night?
part.
Where did you stay last night?
I stayed just next door actually.
Just
in,
name the hotel.
ITC.
ITC. Did it have a fan?
No.
Would you have gone to ITC hotel if they given you a fan and not air conditioning?
Yes.
अच्छा really?
With
because ये भी thinking है कि भाई अगर 5-star होटल में गए और अगर 15,000 रुपए रात के देने हैं तो भाई फिर एसी तो चलाना ही है हाँ और उसमें फिर कंबल भी लग पड़ना है उसके बाद हाँ that's what we do in a hotel.
See, one more interesting thing I'll tell you.
Yes.
In one hotel I walked in and the thermostat was set to around 19 or something 20. So I asked the receptionist, बोलते you are the only first person you're coming and telling us कि बहुत ठंडा है. Public को तो ठंडा चाहिए ही. So that is why we are setting. फिर बाद में आप अपना बंदोबस्त कर लो.
So Millie and architect साहब, let's hear from
So
the
this is
rating
how
and
it
the
works,
architecture. Let's hear from you.
You know, so-
कहाँ जाएं यहाँ से?
That's what you may design it, but operationally, unless the consumer is sensitized, they will not do it. So
I'm
yeah.
coming to that. Okay, you finish, then I'll.
So,
that's my
Ashish, you actually
point.
touched again a right point, but there is a coexistence. I will tell you, there are so many hotels in Pune. If I have to give an example, our superstar hotels have their windows opening, and many of the times in a good environment, I'll give you the example, the Oxford Golf Club. It's one of the very beautifully designed hotel, mixed mode, where most of the times Pune has a wonderful weather. They don't operate AC. So it's happening, but it's happening at a very minuscule level. And I agree with this gentleman that most of the branded hotels now need to go back to the table and rethink. And all of us together have to push their boundaries. But down the line,
Okay.
it's now fan. There are beautiful looking fans available now. Fans are not an ugly looking element anymore. There are
Sure.
such a super beautiful looking fans. So it's all going to happen.
Okay.
I'm very optimistic. I'm
Your
very
last comment, then we'll go to him.
I
Yes.
think the way we conceive a project from the owner mindset or a developer mindset, they look at only cost, time, quality, and the other aspects, but it's the total carbon ownership also that also needs to come into play, and there has to be some push from that side, and that will drive the consumer or the user behavior also gradually.
Sure. Okay.
Hello everyone, my name is Upendra Kulkarni. I'm from Pune, heading a company called HCS Global Corp. We are into hospitality consulting and advisory. My question is to Mr. Shikre. There's a definitely, processes and new technology will definitely do wonders for, all the things, whatever we are discussing right now. But does this mean that linear or minimalist construction or building would be a better way to take the things ahead, to cut down on the carbon footprint or the economic viability of the project? Does that mean that way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is the only way forward. Let me quickly give you an example. When Taj started their Ginger, the target was given to everybody that we want to do a hotel with 20 lakh rupees a key, which is absolutely unheard of. Normally, even a budget hotel would go to at least 30 lakh rupees or 35 lakh rupees, but a very stringent target was given to them. They made some mistakes. They went to the window AC, then they corrected their mistakes. But when the targets were kept like that, first they focused on a lean construction. They focused on a passive design strategies. Lean construction is again, Ashish, something where you are testing it and retesting it, that you are not overdoing in terms of quantum, you are not doing overdoing in terms of over specifying things, and not getting something aspirational. Like you want to put an Italian marble or you want to put a light fitting which is imported. You are looking at every element at its life cycle analysis, its cost benefit analysis, and its operational energy. They were focusing on energy then. Now they will start focusing on carbon. I'll give you an example. Even in Fulton Hotel, they give a choice to a customer. You can get a towel or you can get a pancha. Pancha is that a cotton kind of a towel. So they said, if you use this cotton kind of a pancha, it is going to save so much of water and you are helping. You will be surprised that 80% of the so-called absolutely sophisticated client also go for that. So people are very conscious about it. You see, you don't underestimate people's cooperation and attitude.
You are right, and I think that this.
We have to push the boundaries.
With this, I'll have to bring the panel to an end because I think we've overshot. We didn't realize it's been nearly an hour that we have been debating on this subject. So it's been very interesting. Thank you for the questions that you brought up, and you all prompted it in that manner. So to me, the learning is only one. Decarbonization is real. 6 degrees, what you spoke about, is if it is allowed to happen, I think the consequences science is already telling us for all of us. हमारे लाइफ में होता है, हमारे बच्चों की लाइफ में होता है. That is a debate we can keep doing. And at the end of the day, rules and regulations, codes and standards are changing. The panel was unanimous that within 10 years, you will see stricter codes, whether it's about manufacturing or whether it is about operation. It'll come in. The ESG, which has come in, which has become mandatory for the larger firms, is going to trickle down to not so large firms and in some form to the MSMEs also, which may not be as strict as what the top one is following, but it'll definitely trickle downwards. Because ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि income tax सिर्फ बड़ी कंपनियां दें, छोटी ना दें. इनकम टैक्स तो सबको देना है. इससे कार्बन टैक्स भी आएगा, वो हम सबको देना है. And it'll even go down to our level also in some form, some manner, which will evolve in the world going forward, because people are talking about carbon tax now. The only way, as I see, is the whole, and I've said it in many forums, the green movement has been a top-down approach. And in top-down, we sort of got held up at a certain level because we could not go down because the user was not sensitized. Here, if the carbon becomes the bottom-up approach, where you and I, when we go to a hotel, we say, what is your carbon footprint? You tell us that. Because when I come to your hotel, it's adding to my carbon footprint, which is my scope 3 emissions here. So let's talk about it. I think that is the phase when it comes down to, I think the brands, operators, owners, designers, everybody will be forced to think differently, and I think that's where we need to go. That was the intent of the panel today. Thank you again, panelists, for wonderful discussions that you did. Had a great time moderating and listening and learning also. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You made it very interesting, Ashish.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
Thank
the
you very
moderation.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's always
Thank
delight
you.
to